Deputy Higgins, please. Deputy Higgins. Deputy Higgins.
Taoiseach, on March the 9th, you stood in this stall just after your nomination and you said, quote, "Honesty is not alone our best policy, but our only policy." Taoiseach, what is honest about the cynical kite flying by half your cabinet over the last week, manipulating the media and the people, more importantly, with stories of horror cuts and charges, so that when they bring them in a little bit less, they hope that people might accept them? Taoiseach, will you prove this morning whether you believe that honesty is the only policy by answering a simple test? Test 1. 1 week before the general election, your Taoiseach and Labour Party leader Deputy Gilmore said, quote, "The Labour Party will not agree to having child benefit cut. Fine Gael need to drop their plans to cut it." Will you make an honest man of Deputy Gilmore this morning, and more importantly, on budget day? Test 2. Test 2. Programme for government, quote, "We will maintain social welfare rates," end quote. Will you make an honest woman the Minister for Social Protection this morning and in budget day? And more importantly, an honest government. No social welfare cuts. Test 3. Labour Party manifesto, quote, "Labour believes the €500 increase in student service charges to €2,000 is a step too far. Labour will reverse the increase." Will you make an honest party of the Labour Party on budget day? Will you insist that honesty prevails in this regard on budget day? Test 4. The Minister for Finance announced a 0.6% levy on pensions for 4 years, so-called Jobs Initiative. Tara miners have exposed the truth. This translates into a savage 10% on their modest pension of €10,000 each year for 4 years. Will you restore honesty here? Don't divert from my questions. It's simple, yes or no. I'm not asking you to give the budget, so don't say that. I'm asking you to see, will you stand by your dictum that honesty is the only policy and honour these commitments of your partners in government and your government? And finally, will you make honest little elves of the Labour Party backbenchers who are busily mining for votes?
We're over time. Come on.
Deputy, you're over time.
Repeating all the messages of their leaders. Now we hear.
Yeah. You're over time. You're over time.
We hear from journalists. that they've gone hiding in the woods over the last few days. So,
thank you.
I'd like a straight answer in this regard.
Deputy, can I ask you once again? Would you please allow some opportunity to ask a question and for somebody to answer it? Thank you. All you're doing is encouraging disorder.
Deputy has given four examination questions here. He reminds me a bit of the return of Joe McCarthy, Senator Joe McCarthy. Did you ever, have you ever, would you ever associate with the Communist Party? Answer yes or no. I know that you're acting here as a benign parliamentary terrorist. In respect to the questions that you asked, I will make an honest leader of Deputy Eamon Gilmore. What you talk about was the Labour Party programme prior to the general election, and that did make a very clear reference to the issue of childcare. Deputy Gilmore and myself and our colleagues agreed on a programme for government subsequently. So you are correct. The Labour Party programme was very clear prior to the election. It's 100 marks. That's 100%. No denial there. No denial. No denial, Deputy Gilmore was completely honest in his pronouncements prior to the election. Test number 2, the answer is the same. You quote correctly from the Labour Party policy prior to the general election. That's also correct, and there is no dishonesty there. That was what the Labour Party programme said. It's slightly different in the context of agreeing a programme for government between two parties subsequently. And the same applies in the case of test number 3, and the same applies. Well, your fourth question about the percentage levy in respect of the pensions industry is complete fantasy, and you know that. Obviously, the point was made by the eminent deputy that the pensions industry were well able to absorb the vast majority of costs involved in that temporary levy, which provided workers and jobs in your own constituency, which I'm sure you support very well. So the Labour Party are entirely an honest party, and the people that you mentioned in the Labour Party are absolutely truthful, but we're now operating with a programme for government to deal with the reality of the situation that we have in front of us.
Deputy Higgins, supplementary question.
Taoiseach, obviously you have an extraordinary concept of honesty and truth. We will reverse rises in student fees. It's very, very clear what it means. And just because you and Deputy Gilmore then have a chat and agree that you won't, doesn't. What you are doing, in fact, is endorsing dishonesty in this regard. The Labour Party says we will not tolerate a reduction in child benefit. And then you and Deputy Gilmore have a chat and you agree that it's okay to do so.
We're not going back over manifestos.
That is another fundamental dishonesty. On social welfare cuts, you said, not the Labour Party this time, but the programme for government. We will maintain social welfare rates. And finally, with regard to the pensions issue, it is not a fallacy. The reality is that pensioners, working men and women who have slaved all their lives and now on modest pensions, are having it put onto their shoulders, as the Tara miners outside the gates yesterday showed us in black and white, €1,000 levy a year on them. So, Taoiseach, test 1, fail. Test 2, fail. Test 3 on social welfare, clarify please. It's the programme for government, it's not the Labour Party. And test 4, fail. So, 0.
Thank you.
Well,
Deputy,
you didn't say anything about the little L's in the Labour Party, so we leave them answer for themselves over the next while.
Deputy, we're over time.
We want clarification on the social welfare issue to see could you possibly pass 1 out of 4, which will still be a fail overall.
I didn't know that you were advertising for the Higgins Grind School. I've referred to these matters. I met with a number of the Tara miners myself in Navan some time ago, and we're following through on a number of specific issues that they raised. But as I said, the question of the temporary levy there, the cost of that will well be absorbed by the pensions industry. No decisions have been made about the detail of any cuts in social welfare. Clearly, there are going to have to be savings in social welfare, and unless you have a social welfare structure that encourages employment measures, that encourages people to go to work and to want to go to work, you're not going to have the kind of society that you talk about and that we all want to see here, where people have the opportunity to have jobs and work and employment in their own area, if that's what they wish to do. So what you're talking about is speculative, in the sense that the government have not signed off on this. And I'd finally say this to you. The programme for government that you speak of was agreed between both parties, between the Fine Gael party and the Labour Party, and was brought into this House here and was debated and discussed and passed overwhelmingly by the representatives of the people who sent us here to deliver on that mandate.
That completes Labour leaders' questions for today.